Sure. We are an insurtech. We are a platform for everyone to have great insurance products that you love, products that you want. We have our own insurance products, but our primary job is to be the platform that helps customers connect with the insurance providers, those carriers.
And you do that at quite a bit of scale.
Well, we had it's a fantastic company, which I've been there from 2018, but the company started in late 2015, almost 2016. And for an almost 7-year-old company, it has had remarkable growth. We were lucky to have our revenues double practically every year. And the last fundraising, despite the challenging economic circumstances in 2022, we were able to raise money at almost double the valuation from the previous year. 50% the valuation from the previous year at 4.5 billion, which was
amazing. Yeah. So it's one of the largest fintech now in Europe. Is that right?
It could be one of the largest.
Yeah. Wow. Very impressive.
I mean, there's some really big players like Klarna out there. But
you have shares.
I might have a few.
Very good. Well, impressive. And I think equally impressive is HelloFresh. It's also kind of a legend. You tell us a bit,
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be early with HelloFresh. So I started 2015. 7 years, 8 years. No, it's the 8th year. And of course, the business looked very different and the organization looked very, very different 8 years ago. We're still wiping orders on a whiteboard or working with some post-its and spreadsheets and everything. I can tell you later something more about it. This was also one why I decided to really go into data.
Yes.
In our first episode of the Data Masterclass podcast, we have two very special guests. Clemence Chee, Global Senior Director Data at HelloFresh, the world's leading meal kit company, and Robin Jose, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at WeFox, Europe's largest insurance tech. They talk about their own journeys to become data leaders at two iconic Berlin tech companies and the general traits of great data leaders. Let us welcome your host, Alex Borer.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited today to have our first podcast of the Data Masterclass series. And what big honor to have such wonderful guests on the first show here today. We have Robin from WeFox and we have Clemence from HelloFresh, both seasoned data leaders. And I'm sure we're going to cover a lot of things that is interesting for all of you out there. And let's start with a quick round of intro. And I think everyone would be very excited to understand a bit your background and how things shaped you during the last years as a data leader. And maybe we start off with Robin. Would you kindly share a bit of your background, basically?
Sure. My name is Robin, and I currently work as the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for WeFox. I was an insurtech, one of the largest in Germany. And I started my career as a product engineer. And I started in Siemens. I was there for like 8 years. And then I went to Cisco. And at this point of time, sometime in the early 2010s, Cisco and me both, I would say, in some level, kind of understood the power of data. Right? So we started thinking Cisco is this plumbers of the internet, and then we pass so much data over to our customers. And through the internet, how can we use this data to better serve our customers? And this is where we started exploring it. And I absolutely fell in love with the field. And I started investing a lot more, both emotionally as well as in terms of work in this field. And I've been in the data field for more than a decade now, both in the capacity as a leader in large corporates like Cisco and EMC and Dell, as well as running my own startups. Very excited about this field, what this field brings. But currently, we are also in a crossroads where generative AI and new technologies bringing so much additional things to the whole board game. So very excited.
Very, very exciting times. Yes. Clemence, how about you? I mean, what brought you to data? You told me this wonderful story. I mean, you completely started off in a different field, and I think it had to do with aerospace and even very very
remote sensing.
Yeah,
It was remote
I think the
sensing.
space stuff. It
Yeah.
sounded very exciting.
Right. I always wanted to be an astronaut when I was younger. It was very visible from young age when I played with Lego and trying to construct everything together, even taking apart a radio to get the magnet and gluing it under my spaceship. But in the end, I didn't study. I couldn't go to space, obviously, maybe a few years, some point when we are able to. But I did remote sensing. A few years ago, like 15 years ago, it was still called geodesy. So it's basically applied mathematics. But it very quickly evolved into applying mathematics and data for example, computer visualization or for working with radar, with lasers, with measurements. So in the end, it's a lot of measurements.
Right.
And this is how I got into working with data the first time during my studies. But I didn't know I would end up working in data, really working in data, being a data leader. This was not something I planned.
And you also didn't plan one of your moves that you did joining a venture firm, Rocket Internet, yeah? You thought
That's
we were
right.
building rockets. You really thought we were building rockets.
That's right. So yesterday we were still talking and I explained to Alex, when I was studying at the TU München, it was an engineering course. Right? So, and I wasn't very familiar with the business world per se. And I really wasn't familiar that, well, there's now a world in Silicon Valley where smart people are building companies. And in Germany, we had Rocket Internet. I didn't know what that firm was because I didn't have a lot of touch points. And Rocket Internet then had an event at the university. Mm-hmm. And I always wanted to do something with space, with rockets. And I thought, well, maybe that's familiar. That sounds like, I thought they were building some rockets. Went to this event.
Story.
I went to this event and then I realized, well, there's so many things I don't know about. This sounds it was an amazing event. And I asked a lot of questions. I was very curious. And after the event, I talked to the HR people and asked, okay, how can I learn more?
Right.
How does this work? Is there anything that I can, internship or something? Eventually landed an internship and started to become a venture developer. Yeah.
So you design ventures, basically?
Well, I wouldn't say design. I would say the operated and started to build very quickly. Right. So Rocket Internet had a lot of great people who then took a particular problem and tried to resolve that problem building something. Right? So we started up basically, some of the companies.
And do I recall it right? So your focus was really building operations and working operations and then scaling that operation. Is that right?
Eventually, my focus was in supply chain and operations.
Right.
The reason is that the companies that I was engaged with, we had a lot of those supply chain tasks, or last mile, for example, delivery. So
okay.
I would say maybe it's similar like in the early days from Zalando.
Yes.
HelloFresh is very similar. Yeah. Or companies like Gorillas, for example. You always start with first maybe marketing, finding out basically where to launch. There's some growth involved. But I ended up, after doing also legal, finance, growth, marketing.
So everything,
but then really focused on operations.
Oh, what a journey. So you basically know end-to-end how to build a venture. That's what you learned. That's your apprenticeship.
I wish. There's never-ending stories, never-ending things to learn. Yeah.
And I also love the way how you then got back into data. I mean, you started in spaceships and technology, and you did some data work there. Then you learned how to build ventures, and then at some point you were brought back into the data space. Maybe you can explain that. Tell us about that journey, because I think that's quite exciting.
Yeah. So my journey is still very recent, not like Robin, who has been like a very experienced person at field.
I'm a dinosaur, yes.
Yeah. For me, it was when building the company and building the end-to-end operations. I learned that in supply chain, for example, in supply chain, it was defined for transporting information from A to B, basically. The supply chain definition is says not only transporting goods and assets, but also information. It kind of like clicked somehow with me. That when I was working on some supply chain challenges, for example, procurement, I thought, why can't we apply the same ways of working, the same operations to data?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to optimize our processes. I wanted to optimize how we use data to make the right decisions.
Right.
I wanted to actually do the right things, not only based on experience, because I was inexperienced. I always wanted to have this validation.
Yeah.
This is where it started. I was asking those questions. Okay, how much does it really cost? How can we track the costs? How can we improve the process and so on? And we had to build our own data, let's say data products, call it spreadsheets in the beginning of maturity level, but I had to build my own spreadsheets.
To validate what you're doing in the venture, yeah? Because otherwise you would be flying blind. And I think that brought you back into data.
Yes.
Yeah, great. And Robin, you also, when you sort of discovered the data field back then, I think at Cisco, you said, what were your first steps back then? Like, how did you approach that field of data back then?
I think the funny story that I can say is that anytime, so we started this whole team for analytics, right? So every time we go and tell somebody that we were working on analytics, they would ask me that, okay, so you're doing pivot tables in Excel. I'm like, well, that's not exactly what we do. We do that as well, but that's not what analytics means. So I guess back in, let's say in 2009 or something like that, when you said analytics, this is the first thing that comes to people's mind. So I can't really blame them. And so we went from that place where now nobody misunderstands what analytics means, right? So we had a journey, and some of that was very exciting because then machine learning came out, new models came, started talking about deep learning and things like this. So yes, it was quite a ride, I guess, in the last 10 years. Amazing ride, for sure.
And you joined the Berlin tech scene only a couple of years back. Is that right?
That is correct. So back
you moved to Berlin from
Yes, I moved back from India. This is my second time in Berlin because I used to work for Siemens as my first company, and this was like a very different Berlin in the early 2000s. So when I came back in 2016, and I have to say, you're not too far off, right? It's because somebody told me about rocket internet, and I kind of thought that was Germany's equivalent to SpaceX, right?
So you have already two people here.
So I felt so stupid about that. But yeah, 2016, back in 2016, late 2016, we started looking at the European startup ecosystems, and we looked at Berlin and we looked at London, and Berlin was very attractive for us, and then we decided to move in. And I was in the Berlin startup ecosystem from 2017, loved every moment of it. An amazing ecosystem.
What do you love about it?
I think it's a sense of collaboration, and also, Berlin's startup scene has always been so down to earth, so connected, and also so creative. I really like the fact that there's an immense depth of talent in here, and the diversity
from all around the world.
It's a melting pot of talent here. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, agree. And I mean, Clemence, you've been in the Berlin tech scene at Rocket and so on for a long time. So how did that develop over the years? Is that a different, Berlin than compared to your times when you joined Rocket Internet?
Yeah, for sure. Berlin is so dynamic. It is so vibrant. And it's not only in tech, basically, the tech world that I currently work in, but everything besides as well. I mean, if we look at the crypto scene, if we look at the Web3 scene, in Europe, I would say Berlin is a melting point also for crypto and for Web3 topics. I mean, this really changed. And of course, since in the last 15 years, a lot of founders or first employees from the very successful companies in Berlin, they have founded very successful companies now themselves.
Yeah. It's like the second generation now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of knowledge from venture capital,
right?
Where a lot of very, very smart people who actually really operated those companies 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ago, that they actually bring this knowledge and really operate and really help the new generation to innovate.
To do that faster and do less and learn from that failings in the past so we can do it better.
Yes.
Directly. Yeah, fascinating. And when would you say has the Berlin tech space has become to start really turning towards data and AI, and what were sort of trigger points you could observe, I mean, everyone observes it's a big scene, of course, but what you've been there for a while.
Good question. I have to think about this. I think in the end, it was always there. It's just that not everybody was talking about it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first time I personally realized, well, something is really happening in Berlin as well,
right,
with AI or data. It's when the first data companies were founded in Berlin. Good example for maybe the one I can remember is this Rasa, basically.
Yeah, you're right.
LP company.
So they were quite pioneer back then.
Yeah,
in chatbots.
Yeah, they pioneered it very, very early.
Yeah, Flink I think is also Berlin based. Flink
is Berlin based. Yeah. Sure. I mean, a lot of companies who today using data as one of their primary driver for business and their success. They were founded in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. Well, fascinating. And maybe, I think it's also interesting for everyone to understand a bit the companies you're working for, because I think those are really some icons now in Berlin and Europe.
Yeah.
Like those are companies we're proud of that we have them in Europe. So maybe we start off with you with WeFox. Robin, could you just tell us what you guys do?
Sure. We are an insurtech. We are a platform for everyone to have great insurance products that you love, products that you want. We have our own insurance products, but our primary job is to be the platform that helps customers connect with the insurance providers, those carriers.
And you do that at quite a bit of scale.
Well, we had it's a fantastic company, which I've been there from 2018, but the company started in late 2015, almost 2016. And for an almost 7-year-old company, it has had remarkable growth. We were lucky to have our revenues double practically every year. And the last fundraising, despite the challenging economic circumstances in 2022, we were able to raise money at almost double the valuation from the previous year. 50% the valuation from the previous year at 4.5 billion, which was
amazing.
Yeah. Great. So it's one of the largest fintech now in Europe. Is that right?
It could be one of the largest.
Yeah. Wow. Very impressive.
I mean, there's some really big players like Klarna out there. But
you have shares.
I might have a few.
Very good. Well, impressive. And I think equally impressive is HelloFresh. It's also kind of a legend. You tell us a bit,
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be early with HelloFresh. So I started 2015. 7 years, 8 years. Now it's the 8th year. And of course, the business looked very different and the organization looked very, very different 8 years ago. We're still wiping orders on a whiteboard or working with some post-its and spreadsheets and everything. I can tell you later something more about it. This was also why I decided to really go into data.
Yes. Well, you have to fake it until you make it as an adventure. I mean,
in the end,
that's the reality.
It was never faked. It was just
not
very,
faked and
very
then,
immature. Very immature. And today, HelloFresh is a global leader for food solutions. Right, so HelloFresh is a food solutions group in the end.
Yeah,
we have different brands. We have different are located in different geographies, are operating in different geographies
around the world now.
Around the world, yeah,
impressive, and also quite high scale. Operationally, it's quite a challenge, I guess.
It's challenging, but it's also very satisfying to really see how much impact we as a company can also do, for example, for the food supply chain, right? So in terms of sustainability, for example, in terms of reduced packaging for the whole supply chain.
Right.
Yeah, this is really great to see.
Wonderful. Wow. Yeah. Such two very iconic companies here. And I think, I can just tell you, I'm very, very proud that we have that in Europe, because for a while, it looked like, Silicon Valley is doing all the cool stuff and we're not. And I think now we're also doing a lot of cool stuff. And a lot of people are now paying attention to what's happening here in Berlin.
Yeah.
So let's go into data a bit, and let's uncover some of your philosophies of data. And I think maybe the first thing that is probably most relevant to our Data Masterclass audience is, how do you think you can create value with data and AI and analytics at scale? What are your philosophies around, what are the things you're looking at when you want to create really value with data? Maybe starting with Robin.
Sure. A lot has changed in the field of data over the last decade. And my philosophy in terms of looking at data has also changed accordingly, right? So as I say, you make mistakes and then you learn. And hopefully you learn well from it. Well, we started with simple concepts like it's all about analytics and it's all about really understanding how your company is functioning and how we can optimize the performance with data. And from there, we went to this place where we started talking about things like big data, where we said, look, don't worry about the value proposition right now. Just put everything in the data lake, and then eventually something magical will evolve from it. And then you just take data and create value from it. Don't worry about you right now. And then a few years later, we said, nah, that doesn't work, right? So we really have to
I think we all had that.
So we really need to start thinking from the perspective of what would be the right use case and what that you need to start thinking about. And I guess we probably will talk about data as a product soon, so I don't want to jump into that. But in the end, to me, the whole approach to data should be that the data is used for a purpose, and that is to bring a strategic competitive advantage to the company. And that could be that it adds value to the users, because in the end, a firm exists to bring value to the users. But you need to understand as a company, what's your whole story around data, what's your strategy around data, and you need to steer towards that. Whatever you can think of in terms of technology will come and go, right? So you start with data warehouses, data marts, then you say you need to add data lakes to it. And then you say, no, wipe all that, it's data meshes now. Those things will change. I'm sure something new will come tomorrow. But what's not going to change is how are you strategically giving a competitive advantage to the company.
So true. And I think what's also not going to change in our lives is change. I think, data leaders are probably, everyone has to deal with change. Change is a part of life and it's good. But I think for data leaders, we have change all the time. Every few years, every year almost, there's something changing and we have to adapt.
Yeah.
So I think that's, we will touch on the, sort of leadership traits later, but I think that's something really subject to creating value, dealing with that change, I think, as you look at competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
Data. So, Jens, what do you think?
Fully agree. A lot of things that I can touch point on. The question was, how do I see, or how do we create value with data and move forward with AI?
Mm-hmm. Well, the question was, my personal belief is the role of the data leader is to help driving value with data at scale, driving competitive advantage. And, I was wondering, what is your philosophy behind it? What do you think is important to drive value, at scale or drive competitive advantage with data?
Yeah. There's different, I would say maybe I can split in different areas. First, when we say data, we always drive change. This is for me very organizational and transformational. So it's about the people. So I would say one bucket I would put our priorities as leaders in is to deal with people, communicate, share the vision, share the thoughts, a lot of change and transformation. But on the other side, it's also technical or analytical, to understand what the business needs, understands how to put a strategy in place, understand what the current business really needs and wants. And if you imagine this triangle between technology and business, then there's data somehow. There's always a trade-off. Do we actually drive forward technology and do fancy things with machine learning and AI? Or do we actually try to really first solve the problem that those people on the ground operating have? And it needs to be always a trade-off. This is why...
And that's the business part, basically, yeah?
That's the business part. Yeah? And this is where I think the most valuable thing that at least I can do is to try to understand both sides the best.
Yeah.
And then deal with the trade-off. And not everybody knows it. So sometimes tech wants to do tech things, business people want to do really business things. But for me, it's to try to negotiate the best out of it. This triangle will be I always say to my team, let's try to be the glue between the things.
Right.
And things need to stick, but you don't have to be particularly one or the other, but we are the glue between the people.
I love that. So, and I think it's so true. And as a data leader, you're so often in between a lot of things. And if you do things right, things work somehow magically together. Sometimes people don't see that it's your contribution, but you still have that satisfaction because you can see you drive value in the organization. And the other thing that you mentioned with the trade-offs, I think that's at the core of data leadership to work out those trade-offs between fixing the data properly, doing some data fixes just to catch something, creating innovation fast, or rather, build something out that is at scale, that maybe involves more people and creates a more data-driven culture. You have these trade-offs all the time, staying with your legacy technologies, but using the data for value, or rather putting those legacy technologies into something more modern, because even tech companies have now legacy.
Yeah.
Because we have so many changes right now or in the last years in technology. So I think those are decisions that we need to deal with every day. So.
I would say the three of us sitting here together, if we can classify or make have data on it, our resilience level is really, really, really high.
Yeah.
Because data, you always have an extremely high resilience level to try to push things through or to actually do the right things in the end.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So resilience, absolutely. And I think that's probably also one reason why it's so hard for data leaders to stay on sometimes in one job for a longer time, because paradigms are changing. Maybe maybe they bring you in as an AI leader, but then 2 years later, they need rather a data management leader, or they bring somebody in who has expertise on inner processes and to how to drive automation and processes. But maybe what's needed after 2 years is somebody who has experienced consumer-facing innovation. And I think that those are the things that are really challenging. We have to be so versatile and so resilient with regards to all the changes.
Yeah.
I know what's your perspective here.
No, I would go with what Clemence said in terms of, I really like that analogy of you being the glue. And interestingly, I read this article, I guess it was about a year back in Harvard Business Review, where they said an average tenure of a CDO is like 2 years, right? So this is the average tenure that they stay in the company. And a lot of that has to do with the misconceptions that CDO is a technical job. Well, it is a technical job, right? But to an extent, because to be that glue, you need to connect to the other side as well. Right? You really need to understand the business. So there are many articles, or there are many thought processes in terms of how data, and not necessarily just the leadership, right? But also the people, the data engineers, and others, bring value to the business, and how you can be this glue. And they always talk about these things like T-shaped skills, right? You need to have the breadth, and you need to have the depth, right? So this is when you actually bring value to the business, or really understand the business. And I guess in many things, right, the philosophy of learning or providing value does not change. You first need to understand something before you can improvise it. So I guess that's very applicable to data.
I think the average, you said 2 years. That's the average, right?
That's the average. Yeah, that's what I read. Yeah.
But I've also read, can't confirm the source now, but some companies who have been in the game for a bit longer, they do have a CDO, for example, or leadership in data. They have a much higher tenure. So at some point, I think companies who are mature enough to understand data, they will also source the right people and actually understand that maybe from year 1 to 3, from year 3 to 5, from 5 to 7, there are different needs. Yeah, this is where you get to change again. When you evolve in this maturity level, then data leadership is changing things.
And you either change as a data leader or you're not fitting.
Exactly. But it kind of looks like you're doing things again.
Right.
But you're not doing things again. You just do it differently on a different maturity level.
You almost have to sort of earn, the next level, and then you sort of play at the next level, and it's hard again because you have to play now in the new league.
I agree. And I mean, it's a standard normal distribution, right? So if the average is 2, obviously there are some really good outliers. And you've been with HelloFresh for now
7 years.
So you're already a big outlier. I'm with
that's great.
WeFox for 2 years. I don't know how long I've been with Zalando now, but
2.5 years.
You're already an outlier.
So I think, I think it's interesting to discuss, what is actually data leadership. And I fundamentally believe that it's also a very entrepreneurial role. So I think people who have that entrepreneurial mindset will rather cope with what is required, because there's so much change, because you all the time need to figure out what are actually the opportunities for your company to leverage data, because it's changing. And once you uncover some opportunities and you utilize them, they're sort of absorbed, and you have to come up with the next thing that's adding more. That's expected from you as a leader. Maybe the people who do the job, they can still continue. And I think another thing that you mentioned was really that triangle. And I think what it boils down to is, that at the end, data leaders have to be sort of a unicorn type of role, where you have to cover data and tech and business. And many great data leaders are actually very deep in their business and can shape the business strategy with data. But at the same time, you need to manage all those engineers for your data platform and also understand data management. And I think this is really, unlike the data scientists, where you today have machine learning engineers, you have data engineers, you have product managers. It's not a unicorn role anymore. I think data leadership is really still a unicorn role. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, in the end, it's kind of like you have a company within a company, right? So if companies evolve, I can take any company today. I strongly believe that those companies become data companies at some point. And everybody needs to process data, and everybody takes the competitive advantage from data to get the increasing the margins. Actually get better. You need the data to improve.
Yes.
I do believe that. And this is why for data teams, data leaders, we always have to see how we can utilize new technology, for example, which is also evolving, to apply to our work in the company, or to apply to our work. to educate our people, to educate our teams, educate our colleagues. It's continuously growing and growing and growing.
Educating ourselves.
Educating ourselves, exactly. I mean, that's extremely, extremely important.
Mm.
This is why it's a never-ending journey. It's not I saw your book upstairs, Alex, from Simon Sinek, right? It says it's not a finite game.
Yeah.
Data is also an infinite game.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And I think as soon as people understand that, it's a beautiful journey.
Maybe you could explain a bit the concept, because I think that's very interesting for data leaders.
Oh, I have to see if I can remember what he exactly he said. But are you familiar with this concept?
I haven't read the book. Sorry, I haven't read the book, so maybe you can help me.
In the end, Simon Sinek, look it up. It's a great author, American author.
Start with Why, I think is one
Start
of the
with Why. Yeah. I think everyone has seen that video for sure.
Yeah. What Simon then described in one of his concept of finite and infinite is that finite always has a goal. Of course, we all have goals, but playing a game, a soccer game, for example, that might be
you have 90 minutes.
90 minutes.
Two teams.
Yes.
They are playing against each other, and whoever has more scores wins. And then everyone goes home and celebrates.
Exactly. However, let's say entrepreneurship, life, relationships, people, growth, right? All of those are infinite games, right? If you have a game where like a everlasting board game, everlasting whatever online game, and that's an infinite game, and it's not about then winning the goals and winning the game, but it's more about the process that is the game. Which is in the end an infinite game, and
it's a bit like continuous improvement as well. Yeah?
Always like life, right? So always,
and continuous adaptation as well.
Yeah,
learning.
Yeah. I mean, this is why also at the beginning I said resilience needs to be high.
Yeah,
because of course, if you're playing this infinite game, and all of us around in the business, we have objectives and goals, right? Everything is time bound. Sometimes it's really hard to get back again and say, okay, yes, we are part of maybe a finite period of time where we want to achieve things. But in the end, what is down the road? What did I do already in the last year? This is part of the infinite.
Yeah, it's a very powerful concept, and I think it can be helpful also for data leaders.
Yeah,
because it's a different way of playing the game, and maybe it's a more realistic way of looking at the game. So I guess what I would be very keen also to understand you as data leaders, what were maybe for both of you, the breakthroughs you had with data, that AI or analytics, where you said, okay, this is where several things came together and clicked. And I created that aha moment where I said, okay, here's something magical happened because we got some things right. And what did you learn? What did you get right? And James, maybe you just continue. This was such a good ride.
Well, I have a very different analogy for that, because I just learned in the last week how a really good egg can be cooked. That this is where I put data together where it clicks. But
that's great. Well, it is a breakthrough.
It is a lot of experimentation on that. But it was actually just two weeks ago. Like my wife does really good boiled eggs for breakfast, like breakfast eggs. I never did it right. She did it. Robin, you can start with. Robin can start. Let me think about this.
Yeah,
sounds good. Yeah, I think a lot of that has to go with the fact that in many ways, when you bring data into business and corporate, right, you have to start thinking from the perspective of exactly like you said, entrepreneurship, right? Because you're not trying to solve a problem which has been solved by somebody else before. You're completely thinking about, well, this is how we did that before. How do I make it faster, better, automate it, or how do I completely change it, disrupt it, maybe build a completely new model? And some of my breakthroughs as I think about what I did in the past One of them was for one of the largest, internet technology companies. And then we started thinking about how do we understand when, like, for example, devices, right, go kaput and replace them much ahead of time, because then our users who will have a huge problem if the internet went down, even for them, for services went down, even for like 10 minutes or even 2 minutes, can completely avoid this altogether. Right?
Mhm.
And this came because we started thinking from the perspective of, okay, maybe in a very silly way, we started looking at like, okay, now we learn machine learning, right? How do I put that into application? So at this point of time, we are probably a solution in search of a problem, but it doesn't matter because when we built it, right, it was so great with the company because we have never thought about this before. We were always trying to optimize or solve the problem in the sense that there shouldn't be an outage. And we should always make our devices so better that it should be nine nines in terms of SLAs or something like that, so that this device never goes bad. But we can also say that it doesn't have to be over-engineered, but we can just turn it into a data problem where we just replace it if we know that it's going to go fail in 3 months from now. Right? So we just completely turned around the problem. And that was a breakthrough moment for me where I said, you don't have to normally start looking at problems with a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
It's a completely different way of solving that problem, and that's a data.
And data gives you new ways of solving things, or even restating the problem.
Restating the problem. So you approach the problem completely differently. Right. And this is where the entrepreneurship part of a data leader comes in. Sorry.
I can pick up on this, fully agree, because when I clicked for me at some point, it was understanding that we have products and services. We were trying to resolve a lot of problems and a lot of requests and so on. In the end, I wanted to become a partner for the other teams. Right. Instead of being an expert for specific questions or being asked for help or for being asked for conducting a particular development of a project, I wanted to become partner very, very first beginning, build those things together. And this is where...
very powerful.
Yeah.
So not being yourself a front runner with data, and also not just being the support service with data, but really somebody who is partnering up with the different business functions that drive value and having to up level and 100% more.
I believe when the transition is made from data teams being maybe a service provider or help desk for queries and so on, become a partner in all the things that the business actually drives forward.
Yeah.
This is where the shift mindset actually comes as well.
Right.
This is where business leaders and tech leaders and data leaders start to work together and prioritizing specific products with data, with the right tech.
And that's very powerful because then you have really a partnership where it goes hand in hand, where it's not like a zombie where two hands are doing different things.
Yes.
That's powerful. It reminds me of an article that Tina Rosario and myself wrote a few months back, where we looked at the evolvement of the CDO role. And that was also our claim, sort of. We believe that is sort of the current generation or what is now asked from data leaders is really becoming the partner of all parts of the business, including things like sustainability, which was not so much on the agenda a few years back, and any other part of the organization that requires data to drive value, requires analytics or AI, machine learning to drive value at scale. And so it's really what you're describing. I think it fits exactly that sort of maturity model.
And this goes through all the different parts of the business.
Right.
Yeah, so what I've seen also is that more and more business teams in a big organization, they start to realize, well, let's work with those guys, with those folks together.
Yeah.
If it's finance always was data-driven, HR becomes more data-driven now. People who have been in very brick and mortar parts of the business.
Right. So it's spreading, It's really spreading.
It's really spreading.
Yeah. I read that as one of the top predictions, I think, in a Forbes article for this year, that data analytics is really spreading into across functions now, much more into parts where it wasn't so Oh, so normal. I mean, maybe a spreadsheet type of analytics, but not the kind of what we would refer to as data analytics.
You started the fire, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. Great. So I'm thinking of your story, Robin, with regards to the predictive maintenance case where it really changed sort of the paradigm of looking at things. What were other things that you got right there, to make it work? I mean, did it go into production and, did it work after all? And what were other things that helped you to get there? I understand you found, and that's probably one of the key learnings, you found the right problem and the right approach to solve the problem. So a lot of, I would say, product management thinking there.
Yep. I wish I could say that it was so easy. We found something and it was magical, and then we put it to production, and 6 months later it worked. But it took us 2 years to actually get there.
But it was the first time that your company did that back then.
Yes,
right?
It was.
So it was learning.
And yes, and that was the problem in itself, right? It took a bit of convincing for people to even look at it, that this could be a product. And then, of course, being at this point of time, and this was quite some time back, and then we had challenges in terms of implementation. So none of it was perfect, but boy, am I glad I did it, because we learned so much from it. And in the end, it was a very successful product for the company. So we basically started an entire product series from it. So it was all worth it, but it wasn't easy.
So it was the foundation for everything else that was coming afterwards, basically.
It was, yeah. Now we seriously then started saying that, well, there is a market, right? There is an huge opportunity.
Right. And it works. You showed that it works.
And we showed that it worked. It took time, sure, but it worked.
But what were the things that really took time? What were the tough things that you need to overcome, where some things didn't go right in the beginning and then you had to figure out ways?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's probably, as I said, right, there's no such thing as a bad idea, but there's a such thing as an idea which is a little bit ahead of its time. Yeah. And this was one of those problems, because there never was a product like that before.
Right.
And when you want to push a product like that, there's always questions about, is this even viable? Can you actually do this? I know that it works in a prototype, right? Yeah. But can you do this consistently? Can we claim to our customers that this works? What are the SLAs that we want to tell the customers? What do we bet on it? Do we want to bet our company's reputation on it? Right? So there's so many pieces that come in. And of course, we also have to realize that we are trying to do this. We are learning this by doing, right? So we don't have anything to. It's a completely green field, and we're trying to build this while convincing others that this is the right thing to do. So there you go, classic entrepreneurship, right? You're building something. I wouldn't say fake it till you make it, but I would say, till you become it. It was quite a ride.
So it sounds like you need resilience, and there was a lot of change management involved as well, and a lot of convincing, a lot of trust building. Is that right?
Right. There's a lot of trust building, but the good part is that it pays in the end, right? So the moment you go through those motions, you get it done, and then you can prove that it works.
And that is your breakthrough, because then you have something you said, I taught you, and this is working, and you should trust me now in every new journey.
Yeah, without telling, I told you.
I did.
Wonderful. So I guess we talked now a lot about, data leadership. We talked about the different traits as a data leader: resilience, entrepreneurship, mindset,
change.
Also accepting that it's an infinite game and not a finite game. I think those are all very, very important aspects. Any other traits that you would see with data leaders?
Besides those that you mentioned.
And the unicorn kind of type of role, that you have to cover data, tech, and business.
So I learned this from my teams, that they always said, well, the vision that I try to explain has been always very, very big. So maybe we are all kind of like dreamers. So imagine basically we have this full transparency from data where it's being created until the end of consuming it. And imagine we can turn like a small button. You understand the full lineage and really see how you can really impact the business. So my background was from this operations, right?
Right.
So I said earlier, in supply chain, you have this, ideally you have end-to-end transparency to be able to steer your financials, to steer your profit contribution. In the end, this goes the same for all data pipelines that we have today. So if I tell my teams, okay, this is like a really big idea to say, I want to connect all the data points that we have in the company or at any organization and imagine how powerful this can be if we can always optimize, or let's say minimize specific metrics or maximize specific metrics based on the understanding of all the different data points. Right? So it's like optimize, it's like perfect. Right. From a mathematical model perspective, you put every data point as a parameter.
Yeah.
This makes a lot of sense. Huh? How to do it? You have to be then the dreamer, but to be realistic enough to break this down and say, well, we can't do all of this. Maybe not in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Maybe my dreams are shattered, but I have to rebuild my dreams again. Right? So then breaking this down step by step, where then I say, in the end, you have to be very disciplined on also operating the building blocks to actually achieve this ever-changing dream.
Yeah. And figure out different ways on the way, because you won't know where you want to go, but you need to find out how do I get there on the way.
Yeah. This is why I really like the example that you had on internal entrepreneurship, because we have to always find a way, maybe be creative, on how to actually then achieve those smaller objectives.
Right. I think that's very powerful. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's if I had to describe what is data strategy, I would also keep it as simple as you said. Like, you need a very bold vision. You need to be brutally honest where you are today. And then you need to figure out ways to get there. That's data strategy. And it's complex, as we all know, in execution. But I think if you don't know where you want to go, and when you don't know where you are today, it's impossible. But once you start doing that, I think dreams can be
bold in the end. I mean, I've heard different things in the industry. Building a platform, for example, is not necessarily a strategy. It's a tactic. Actually enable some
true.
But when people talk about data strategy and they say, "Oh, we're building a platform," okay, good for you.
That's not a data strategy. That's a platform. That's a means to an end. Like you might need a data platform for reaching your goals that you have, like you had in your case, but maybe you didn't need it for that. I think that's something that we sometimes miss out on, probably because it's so easy it's so tangible to say, hey, I'm building a platform, it's going to be huge and will unlock so much value, and and then maybe you have 2 years time of building that because everyone is waiting for that value, and at some point people start asking those questions. Okay, where's the value?
Exactly. What is the value?
That's the value.
What's the value? Is it how do you do the I'm quite passionate about this topic now.
So how does the data create value? I mean, let's go back to that. It's like we have not covered that in depth yet.
We have not, and it really depends where an organization stands or what maturity or education people have received around data. Because value can create if you help people to access data already faster. So you drive down, let's say, overhead costs. You drive down the time to insights. But value also happens if you can provide a quick product for a marketing team, for a growth team, for logistics teams, for a financial team, a proper product which helps them in making better decisions.
Yeah.
Right. So value is really, can only understand the value of your data products, data services, if you really understand how the organization works and how the company and the people in the company actually work.
Yeah.
And this is where I always connect data and processes together somehow. In processes and business processes were not a thing 10 years ago. They are now today. Because people start to realize, well, business processes are linked to data creation. Data operations is linked to improving.
It's like a cycle.
Exactly, yeah.
The processes, and it's a virtuous cycle once you get it right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like let's do this and then this happens.
Yeah.
It's a cycle.
Right.
Again, infinite, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, I think processes is probably and decisions are probably the most powerful things where you can drive value of data. I think you can automate, of course, those processes. You can improve those processes. You can improve decisions. You can automate decisions. I think you can also now build data more and more into a customer journey and direct into the product, like you mentioned. I think this is also a very, very powerful way. I know, Robin, what would you add? How does data ultimately create value, or what are the aspect that you are most fascinated of, looking after?
I think the good and the bad parts of being in the data world and the data leadership thing is that you have so many problems that you can solve with data, right? Which is the great thing.
Yes.
But at the same time, it also creates an issue of which one of those I will choose, because none of us have. The game might be infinite, but the budget is not, right? So we always
and the time is now, and you need to create some value now. Yeah,
value now. So you also have to pick and choose. And probably some of the mistakes I did in the past, also what I learned from other people's mistakes, is also that you need to choose something which is either a big pain point for the company or a core competency for the company. So, for example, if I might be super excited about now creating an AI model which chooses the perfect employees for my company, right? And this is great. I read about these articles, 3 articles on the internet, how somebody does it. But I need to start asking myself, is this the biggest problem that my company wants to solve right now?
Right.
It may be, may not be, right? We cannot prescribe here. But if you are a company who is providing HR-related services, that might be your core competency. And then you absolutely might want to go for it. And if you're a company who has, I don't know, maybe 50,000 people, and then you do a lot of recruiting, maybe that's a big, right? And you should go for it. But for a company of a small scale where you do recruiting, but it's not your core competency, you might choose something else. So marketing, if you are a company who has a lot of digital acquisitions of customers, and then you have a lot of marketing budget, there's absolutely an area that you want to get into, right? So I guess in a way, just going back to what you said about, I really like that analogy where you said the data leader is a partner, right? He or she is a partner to all the other leadership and divisions within the company. They play that role of the glue where they bring technology, data, and the company business together. So they should work together and help in choosing the right projects, right initiatives, which really brings the value from the data.
It's hard to actually pinpoint down immediately to say, okay, where's the value? Because if you're this entrepreneur, right, and you're developing or help developing the company and mature data, then it's different roles. And you're also part of the human resource leader. Yeah, because all the technology that we use today, we learn it, but we have to have our colleagues to understand and learn with it as well. And a higher retention from the colleagues or good culture, data culture, where people understand what data means, when people start to talk the similar language. And this is extremely powerful as an organization. And this is branding as well. This has a lot of value as well. If people say, well, I'm working for this company, they help me with learning new things which university doesn't teach, for example, or which I have never learned myself because there's no content, then it's incredibly powerful as well. People will start talking about this.
Absolutely agree. It's very powerful. And I think you brought 2 very, very important things. One is, I think being a data-driven company attracts talent and helps you to retain talent. I think that's a very, very important aspect of value creation with data. That should not be underestimated. And what you brought up is something that reminds me of domain-driven architecture, where you have that principle where wherever it's really something core, your core competence, which gives you differentiation in the market, you not only want to build as much as possible yourself, where it makes sense, of course, but you want to be absolutely the best in that thing. while maybe some other things are more supportive for that. So you might still need to build that because you don't get something off the market, off the shelf, but you don't need the best people or you don't need to overinvest there. You just need to build some functions that are easy to imitate. And wherever there is something on the market, you might buy that solution. And I think that I just, thought about, domain-driven architecture when you were talking about this, because domain-driven architecture is so much more than a tech concept. It's really also a way of thinking as a tech business about your business.
Yeah, a lot of when I was one of my first projects, I started with spreadsheets. Right? So with people working, I was in this marketing team in the beginning of my career. I had a specific domain, and I built a spreadsheet to find and to automate specific metrics.
Yeah,
moved to a different. Then I moved to a different domain, to procurement and supply chain. Again, built a spreadsheet there, right? But at the end, those products that I built in the marketing team and also in the procurement team, they somehow evolved, became proper products with their own architecture, right? The tables, the dimensions, fact tables and dimensions themselves. And this is, I think, where I think nobody. Well, it's not something new.
Yeah,
right. I see it again as it evolves. It evolved, and it's just a new maturity of
thinking, of thinking in domains. Yeah, we were not ready back then to go the full step of domain-driven architecture in data.
Yeah, but it's not new.
It's not new. Yeah, true. Great. Maybe let's also touch some stories from your past. Every data leader has scars, I would say. What are your scars? Where did things really didn't go as intended, and what did you learn from that? Robin, you want to start?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I have to say I made a lot of mistakes. But I guess
that's how you learn. That's why you're here. That's why you made it.
I think the biggest mistakes that I've done, of course, is just going with this whole philosophy that build it and they will come, right? So just with this view that in the end, you don't throw away anything. You just keep all the data in the central place and focus on just getting that data into the central place. So we started with this belief that the use cases will evolve naturally, but for the first few years, we just focus on nothing else but integrating each and every part of the organization into a central place. The problem, the problem is that it takes too much time and too much effort, and in the end, as you rightly said, right, at some point of time, they will say, show me the value. And then you start thinking from your perspective that, oh my God, I should have probably thought of that before in terms of what would be the use cases that I would start building from this data.
And so I guess that's your learning. That's how you approach it today. You would always start with, okay, where's the values?
That is correct. Now I started thinking more from the perspective of data products, which is kind of like an evolution from the domain-driven design that you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
So I always start thinking this from the perspective of eventually what would be the final data products that I want to build.
Right.
And I hope to take the team also in that direction.
Perfect. Yeah. I think that's a very good interlude to the topic of data as a product, which is a very exciting one. But before that, I'm so keen to hear your story, Clemence. Yeah, about things that did not work out so well and you learned incredibly from that.
Every day when I wake up, I realize things. So there's a lot of different stories I can tell, but maybe one of the earliest stories was when I was in Australia working on a tool for procurement. And I then had this idea of doing the things in a particular way, which are more data driven. I wanted to quantify things. I wanted to understand and analyze, be able to actually make those right decisions. And basically coming from Berlin, moved to Australia very spontaneously. I, like this hotshot guy, I said, let's do it this way. I think we have to do it this way. It's very little overhead. Can you just please help me do this table? Every day you actually click this button. You actually now just collect this data for me, please. What I did not understand at the point of time is to work with that procurement officer in this case, understand what is their workflow, how do they think, how do they actually get the best out of it, how can I onboard that partner, that colleague, into teaming up on the report and dashboard that I tried to build.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah,
I think this now clicks more in me.
Yeah.
This is what a turning point was when I started to try to be much more customer centric.
Yeah.
Which is where I learned, well, maybe sometimes when I think this is the best solution for tech team or for the data team at the moment, it will never fly because you don't have the buy-in from who you're actually doing it eventually in the end, who you are doing it for. In the end, you always do it for a business person or one of the people in the commercial teams, because in the end, this is what drives the business forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a very nice story. That reminds me of something which was an important learning for me, and one of my biggest mistakes in terms of, we talked about this product, right, where we thought we completely changed the viewpoint in terms of predicting when this device would fail, so that we can do preventive maintenance ahead of time. One of the mistakes that we did was assumption in terms of the operational workflow. So these are devices which cost millions of dollars, right? So what happens when something like this fails, or you want to do preventive maintenance, is that you don't ship a new part to them. Rather, you fly an engineer over who takes this replacement stuff with him or her and then goes there and changes things. And then we propose that we build this model which worked perfectly. We're all happy with the 90% accuracy and everything. But what we didn't realize is that the operational manager who's deciding this and deciding to send the engineer over, what they're trying to do is optimize on the flight costs and the travel, right? So you also have to think from the perspective of how this model is going to behave in the field.
In the real world.
Yeah. And now that we realized it, what we did was to change the model in itself in a way to solve the traveling salesman problem, right? The classic traveling salesman problem. So that how do you optimize not just for the devices that are failing, but also in a way that it manages the logistics better. So my biggest learning has been from this slight disaster, which we recovered from, was that we need to understand how it works in the field. You need to be closer to the operations. Yeah.
Amazing learnings. Well, we covered so many topics, data leadership, data value, your personal stories, I think the Berlin tech scene. And I think you really created a great, already introduction to one of our next topics coming up on data as a product. So you're listening here to the Data Masterclass podcast series. We're taking a small break. And thank you very much for listening so far. And this is all about finding ways to get more value out of data at scale in your organization. And for us, data mastery is really something that comes from just learning, sometimes failing and learning from that. And it's something we need to adapt. And we heard that in today's show. We need to adapt. We need to constantly be resilient. And it's an infinite game. So thank you very much for listening so far at the Data Masterclass show.
We hope you enjoyed our first episode of the Data Masterclass podcast, in which we discussed data leadership in Berlin. You can fast-track your journey to data mastery by joining our 3 days immersive training event Data Masterclass Europe 2023 at www.datamasterclass.eu. Borek Data Masterclass, where great data journeys begin.